Well, it's that time of the week again. We are making another DPS for your main in Shadowlands video. This time is gonna be for ranged. Same question everyone has been asking for the upcoming expansion. Which spec am I going to main? Which role am I going to main? And then which spec am I gonna choose? Am I gonna be screwed if I pick a spec that doesn't have a backup plan? If I don't pick Mage or Warlock, where I can't reroll to a different spec, where I can't respec and I have to reroll completely to a different class? What if I want to play Shadow? Am I gonna get fucked again by Blizzard if it gets nerfed or if it's undertuned? So enter slide number 2. After slide number 1 from the mini DPS video, we have slide number 2. The difference between slide number 1 and slide number 2, Shriekhand. What's Shriekhand? Nothing. It's just the font of the letters. That's it. That's all that changed. Beyond that, it's the same slide. We're gonna divide each spec based on this compass. We have the AoE and single target split, and then we have the Raid and Mythic Plus split. This isn't just going to be about the damage of AoE and the damage of single target, it's also going to be related to things such as burst, as opposed to sustained damage. Burst is going to be more valuable in Mythic Plus compared to sustained damage, particularly things like sustained cleave, sustained 2 and 3 target damage. That is way more valuable in a Raid environment than it is in Mythic Plus. Same for single target. Single target burst, Mythic Plus is not just all about AoE. Single target burst is also very valuable in Mythic Plus, specifically during certain affixes, specifically fortified. And then you have Raids and Mythic Plus split, where things like mobility are more valuable in a Raid environment than they are in Mythic Plus, due to the amount of movement you have to do to not stand in bed. And then you have things like CC, utility, stuns, interrupts, immunities, and cheat mechanics, skips, that are all going to be more valuable in Mythic Plus. Not that they are useless in a Raid, but comparatively, Mythic Plus pulls more value towards those aspects. So I realized last time I was a little bit racist towards the bottom letters of the alphabet, starting from A. So this time around I'm gonna pull a reverse. I'm gonna be inclusive. I've gotten a talk from my HR department, so now I'm gonna start from the bottom. I'm gonna start from the disenfranchised of the alphabet, the letter S. And letter S is going to be Shadow. Shadow Priest is going to go and slot itself all the way over here, ruining my new font right from the start. Why is Shadow there? Didn't you put Shadow very high when you rated it in Mythic Plus? Didn't you think it was doing very well and it had a lot of AoE? It was very good. Yes, let me finish. Let me fucking finish. The reason why it's here is because, comparatively speaking, it's going to have more value in a raid environment. Why? Shadow is still very squishy and it's dangerous to keep yourself alive in a Mythic Plus environment. You don't have an immunity, you don't have a very strong defensive outside of dispersion, and dispersion is gonna can your DPS when you use it as well. You're also very immobile, you're very slow, it's not easy to DPS on the move as Shadow. All these are things that make it worse in Mythic Plus. What's making it even worse in Mythic Plus is their utility. Come on class, I haven't asked you a question in a while. What's the utility of a Shadow Priest in Mythic Plus? Mind control, shackle undead. You know, there isn't much. Their utility is bad for Mythic Plus. All of this makes them just more suited for raid environments. Another thing, multi-dotting, as I mentioned before when it came to AoE, multi-dotting, sustain, dot cleave and cleave. Shadow Priest is very strong. It is valuable in raids, less valuable in Mythic Plus. They have still good single target, very strong cleave, and they now have AoE. They now have also burst AoE with Void Eruption, with the Shadow Fiend and the new Shadow Prism Legendary. With Syrian Nightmare, the AoE is strong, which is why I'm keeping them in between AoE and single target, not leaning towards either or. However, they are going to be staying closer to the raid quadrant than the Mythic Plus one. At the end of the day, you can praise all the new things that Priest is going to bring, the rework Shadow Priest, but I still think something like, for example, a Mage, specifically a Frost Mage, is going to be more wanted in Mythic Plus because of what it brings compared to a Shadow Priest. So, Shadow Priest is going to be sitting in the raid side for now. Now we have Markmanship Hunter down the alphabet. Markmanship Hunter takes a trip all the way over here. This is going to be the hill I want to die on. I refuse to acknowledge the brokenness and overtunedness that Markmanship Hunter has benefited from the past few weeks in Mythic Plus. They have gotten, supposedly, their Fey Covenant fixed now. They have gotten their Chimera Shot severely nerfed. Their Chakram also nerfed by half. Their AoE damage is being slowly tuned back into normalcy. So once we take that into account and we consider their damage now being way more tuned to being normal than before, I think Markmanship remains a more raid-focused spec than Mythic Plus. They have a very strong thing they can use in raids, which is Cleave. The ability to gain trick shots with multi-shot on 3 targets. and do AoE with your aim shot, which is just your single target rotation, and still do strong cleave, is very powerful in raids and less in Mythic Plus. In Mythic Plus you don't want to hit 3 targets, you want to hit 6, 7, 8. Not only that, but in Mythic Plus you want to have cooldowns to burst down those 5, 6, 7, 8 targets, and Markmanship does not have them. True Shot is a meme. It's just a mediocre cooldown. If you compare it to other big cooldowns like Combustion, like Avenging Rat, like Metamorphosis, Markmanship really just doesn't. So already not having strong burst cooldowns to use in Mythic Plus makes you automatically closer to being a raid spec. And most of the time it's not even a compliment, it's more like get the fuck out of Mythic Plus. More so than you're amazing for raids. But Hunter is certainly not bad for raids. They have been for years, for 15 years pretty much, the spec that is the best at moving around, at casting on the move, losing the least amount of DPS when they have to move, when they have to switch targets. Granted, BM is going to have more trouble because they're stupid ass AI on their pet. But all in all, I do believe Markmanship Hunter is going to be a solid spec for raids. Their single target damage and their cleave damage with their aim shot, their trick shots and their legendary, even after the Chimera shot nerfs, is still very strong, which is good in raids and a little bit less in Mythic Plus. Just look at the amount of times in a raid you're going to be hitting 2, 3, 4 targets compared to the amount of times you will be hitting 5, 6 or 7. It is going to give the toolkit of Markmanship Hunter a lot of value in a raid environment, which is not going to suffer as much from the lack of cooldowns that they would have to use in Mythic Plus to catch up to all the other specs that can use burst cooldowns in those big Mythic Plus trash packs. And our third DPS spec down the alphabet is going to be Frost. I just realized, third range spec and we're already at F. Most of the range DPS specs start with A, B, C, D, E, F. That's interesting. Anyways, Frost. Frost is going here. Why is it going here? Well, as I mentioned already in the Mythic Plus ranking video for specs, I put Frost into S tier. I mentioned the strongest feat of Frost being the fact that they can do all types of damage profile without having to change around multiple talents or multiple legendaries. This allows them to be good at them at the same time. For example, Frost DK, not Frost Mage, has very strong AoE, very strong sustained AoE, burst AoE. If they change talents, even if they change an entire weapon, going into two-handed weapons, they can have a much stronger single target. But it's not something they can do in the same encounter, or in the same Mythic Plus key. This is something Frost can do. The reason why they are peaking all the way into the AoE quadrant, in the exact opposite as single target, is because their pure single target is not very strong compared to their AoE, but specifically to their cleave, which is why I am cooking in the cleave with the AoE, for the purposes of splitting this quadrant into 4 and making it simple, otherwise it would be a clusterfuck. For both Raids and Mythic Plus, their cleave is very strong. Their Ice Lance spam is extremely powerful, if overtuned. Their Frozen Orb with their legendary as well, extremely low cooldown, very high uptime. Their damage can spike so high in these short windows with their Fingers of Frost and Brain Freeze that they don't even suffer not having a proper cooldown. As I mentioned, cooldowns being very powerful in Mythic Plus, Icy Vein or Frost is shit, but they only have Frozen Orb. Frozen Orb is on such a short cooldown and it's usable so often that sort of makes up for it. They are also in the middle of Mythic Plus and Raids because they have things like an immunity for both Raids and Mythic Plus. They have Bloodlust, they have Arcane Intellect, they can give perma slow, and they can even talent to make it even better of a slow, which is going to be very powerful in Mythic Plus in certain affixes. Of course, very good mobility, very strong ability to cast on the move, which is good, very good in Raids, and also pretty good in Mythic Plus. So this is where we are going to slot Frost Mage. Very, very strong in cleave, very, very strong in AoE. Next we have the little brother of Frost, we have Fire. Fire is going to go about here. Now, I mentioned multiple videos before, forget what you saw in BFA, that was not Fire Mage. You need to go back to Uldir and BOD to see what Fire Mage was, which was nothing because Fire Mage wasn't being played in Uldir and BOD. Fire Mage right now is stronger in single target than it is in AoE, and it's going to be stronger in Raids than it is in Mythic Plus. Reasons. The key difference between Frost Mage and Fire Mage when it comes to Mythic Plus is that Frost Mage has a massive perma-slow on all targets that is very easily applicable, and Fire Mage doesn't have anything. They have eventually Dragon's Breath, possibly one Disorient that they can use in pseudo melee range, which certainly that doesn't make up for the slow effectiveness of a Frost. When it comes to damage profile, as I mentioned, Frost being good at almost everything beyond single target. Fire, on the other hand, they do still have solid single target in their kit, in their base rotation. The numbers aren't quite there yet, but they have the potential to scale, and they will. Their AoE as well as their cleave is a different issue though. As you know, Ignite no longer spreads automatically. You can no longer shut down your brain, use your Ajara Font of Power, your second trinket can power your combustion and potion and do a million DPS AoE because your Ignite spread everywhere. Now you have to actively spread Ignite with Phoenix Flames, which means you have to first do a full rotation of solid single target damage, then Phoenix Flames, and then it spreads to 8 targets. This is going to be slower. It's not going to be immediate, it's going to require you to ramp up, and the slower you are, the slower your stats, the slower your haste, the slower your crit, the worse it's going to be. So at the start of the expansion this is going to feel terrible. I have no doubt 2 tiers and 100 item levels from now, Fire Mage might have incredible AoE again and be a very strong Mythic Plus spec again, but for now they are definitely more tuned towards single target. And sort of by exclusion they are more tuned towards Raid than they are for Mythic Plus. One, because of how much better Frost is, which is their same class, and it will be overshadowed by Frost, and 2, because of the damage profile. It's just more tuned towards raiding right now. Again, I will mention this every single time I mention Fire. Fire is one of the specs that will scale the most and the best throughout the expansion. You're lucky if you were thinking about playing Fire, or if you were thinking about playing Mage, that you have 3 specs to choose from. If Fire was in the same position of Elemental Shaman or Shadow Priest or Balanced Druid, I would tell you to never ever play Fire, because you had no backup plan and no alternative specs to choose from to do DPS with, as a ranged DPS at least, so it is not as disastrous as it seems for Fire. You will be fine. Eventually, not now. And to finish off the first part of our ranged DPS main spec hunting, we're gonna go and look at Elemental Shaman. Elemental Shaman is going here. So, a little bit closer to AoE than it is to single target, and about the same distance from Raids and Mythic Plus. Elemental Shaman is rather versatile when it comes to their damage profile. They have multiple ways to choose which type of damage they want to do. Unlike Frost Mage, they have to talent and use different legendaries for it. They don't just do everything with a single talent. Shaman can go between Aftershock for AoE or Elemental Blast for single target. They can choose Ice Fury for extra single target, or they can choose Surge of Power for extra Maelstrom generation. They have been bailed out of their complete lack of cleave, as I mentioned in the melee DPS video, like Ret had and Shaman used to have, the lack of targeting 2 to 3 to 4 targets. Now Shaman has a ridiculously strong, and please don't hate me fellow Shaman mains, a ridiculously strong, possibly too strong legendary, Echoes of Great Sundering, which is going to allow you to have very strong cleave, as well as insanely strong AoE when it comes to burst as well. You do still have your meme legendary, your deeply rooted elements, for your ascendance and spread cleave with your Flame Shocks. We still have to see how effective that is going to be, and if that's gonna get nerfed at all after the Primordial Wave nerf, no longer proccing this. But overall, their damage profile keeps them very solidly in all ranges. They're still very strong in single target, it's just that they have more tools for AoE, particularly around their legendaries. AoE including cleave, spread cleave, etc. When it comes to Raids and Mythic Plus, they are at an even stance right now. They are at an even stance, that stance being not indispensable. That is the current ranking of Elemental in both Raids and Mythic Plus. They can be very strong in Raids, they can be very strong in Mythic Plus. Are they gonna be absolutely needed in either one? No. They don't have a very strong defensive, it's a passable one. If you go Primal Elementalist, it's a pretty good one, but it's still not an immunity. They don't have a cheat death or an immunity, they don't have very good mobility. They have been given baseline Spirit Walker's Grace, which makes them better, but they still don't have any sort of dash, blink or teleport. Similar to Druid, but in a worse scale. They are littered with utility, none of which is, completely broken. A Stun Totem, a Slow Totem, Tremor Totem, Off Healing. Their Covenants can also heal when you use them for DPS for a big amount. You can even go Ancestral Guidance to actually have very high HPS burst while you DPS. If you want, you have a Hurt Elemental, which can be useful in Mythic Plus. You do bring Bloodlust, so they are still varied and packing a lot of utility for Mythic Plus, and some of them for Raids as well, particularly Windrush Totem, Offensive Dispel, and Tremor Totem are usually the most used in Mythic Plus when it comes to utility for Shaman. So they are pretty versatile, pretty fluid. When you want to choose which damage profile you want to do, which activity you want to do, they usually have an answer. Remember, though, when you're thinking about Elemental Shaman, is that they are not considered by the community perspective and likely by facts, they're not considered indispensable. They're not considered a must-have to bring something beyond their damage. And that can always be tuned, rearranged, mixed and fixed around, so keep that in mind. And with this we are done with our first half of the Ranged DPS. Pretty empty right side, if I might say so myself, specifically the Mythic Plus side. Frost could have gotten in there, but it's Frost's fault of being also very good in raids, so they can't just go into the Mythic Plus quadrant, they have to stay in between. After this one, we're gonna have the last video of the melee DPS, and then the last half of the Ranged DPS. In the meantime, I want to hear some predictions where all the other specs are gonna end up with, as well as what type of player are you when you're looking for your next main spec. Were you thinking about Mythic Plus? Were you thinking about raids? Did you want to do AoE? Did you want to do single target? Just let me know, and in the meantime, I'm going to clean the kitchen. See you guys soon.